Welcome back to our Beatrice YouTube channel. In today's class, we'll be learning how to make this beautiful three-quarter trouser. So this trouser has a band. It has an elastic band at just the back part, and then it has a slant pocket on both sides of the trouser. So we'll be learning how to make this pocket, the trouser itself, and the band in this tutorial. If this is something you like to learn, kindly stay tuned to the end of this class. Thank you. Okay, so I'll be cutting this three-quarter trouser using freehand method. I'm cutting directly on my fabric, and I'll be marking with this chalk. So I don't know if this chalk is obvious for us to see, but just follow what I'm doing and I'm sure you'll get it. So this marking that I'm reading now is going to be my starting point. That's where I'm going to start. So from there now, you don't need too much measurement for this because it's kind of free. We're going to be using an elastic band on the back side of the trouser to control it, so you're not going to be adding a zipper to this, so we don't need our actual waist measurement. I'll just be working with my hip measurement for this. So now there is a 2 inches band on this trouser. It's a separate band, it's not cut together. So for that, I'm going to be taking my tape. Remember, this is my starting point, so I'll take my tape 2 inches above my starting point before I start my marking. So now this starting point also is going to be my waistline, so I just went 2 inches above it because the 2 inches elastic that I want to add there. So now the next measurement I'll be taking now is my hip measurement, and in this case the hip I'm working with is 9 inches. This is for a big size, okay? And then the next measurement I'm working with is my crotch measurement, and the crotch for this person is 11.5 inches. So I'm going to make all this into a straight line, and then like I said, this is a three-quarter trouser, so it doesn't get to the ankle area. So you just measure where you want your trouser to stop on your client. So in this case, the entire length I want is 28 inches. So I'm adding 2 inches allowance to it for the hem, so I'll make that 30 inches. I hope we get that. So now the next measurement I'll be taking now is my hip measurement. That's my hip circumference, and like I said, this is a big size. The hip circumference I'm working with is 46 inches. 46 divided by 4 is going to give me 11.5. So now from this point now, I'm going to measure 11.5 inches on my waist, my hip, and my crotch. Remember, I said we are going to be using elastic to gather it, so we don't need our true waist measurement. So I'm measuring the 11.5 on my waist, my hip, and my crotch line, and then I'm going to make that into a straight line. Okay, so after making that into a straight line, okay, so I've zoomed in the camera so that I can see my markings well. This is the starting point, which is also my waistline. This is my hip line, and this is my crotch line. So for the circumference, I took my hip divided by 4. The hip is 46 divided by 4 gave me 23, gave me 11.5 inches. And then from this fold point side now, I measured the 11.5 inches on the waist, on the hip, and also on the crotch line. So now to get my crotch curve, I'm going to, on my crotch line, I'm going to measure my thigh measurement. So that's the highest part of your thigh, and for this person the round thigh measurement is 30 inches, and I'll divide that by 2, and that's going to give me 15 inches. So now from this fold point here on my crotch line, I'll place my tape rule on 15 now, and then I'll measure 15 inches. So that was what I used to fold my fabric. I have exactly 15 inches on this point. So here now I'm just going to go outwards by 1 inch like this to give me a guide on how I'm going to draw my crotch curve, and then from that point I'll take a curve or just use my free hand to draw my crotch curve there. Okay, so my crotch curve is done now, as you can see. And this is not a fitted pant, it's a palazzo pant, so I'm just going to take that 15 inch measurement all the way down like that. If you want it fitted, then you will need your round knee measurement and your floor measurement to shape the trouser. So now I'm cutting it out. I want to cut it out in a present so that you see what I'm cutting, because the chalk is not so obvious. So this is my crotch curve here, and then this is my starting point. So this is the front part of my trouser. Now I'm just going to place this front on the back, And then on this side also, because I'm inserting a zipper, if you're not inserting a zipper, you don't a pocket, you may not need to slash it open on this side. Because I want to put a pocket there, so I'm going to divide this. I'm going to slash it so that I'll have two separate front bodies. Okay, so I have it like that. So now to cut my back, I'm going to fold my fabric into two again. Okay, so my fabric is folded into two again, and then I'm going to be adding allowance to this to accommodate the bum at the back. So now to add this allowance, I will try to do it in a simple way for us by adding it on this fold point before shifting it. So on this fold point of my fabric now, I'm going to be measuring 2 inches. That's the allowance I want to use. So I'm measuring 2 inches now on my fold point. I'm measuring 2 inches round, and then I'm going to make it into a straight line. So you can do 1.5, but this is a free pant, so 2 inches is fine for me. So I have 2 inches measured now. So at the point where my 2 inches mark stops, I'm going to place my front block on it. Okay, so I'm using the right side so that it will be contrasting. I will be able to see what I'm doing very well. So you can see I just placed it on it now, and then my allowance is already added 2 inches away from my actual measurement. So now the next thing now is just to add my bum rise to this. So for my bum rise, on this center part here, on the upper part, I'm going to be going upwards by 1 inch, and then I'm going to connect it to my side like this. Okay, so remember this allowance that we have here, I hope you can see it. So I'm going to blend this allowance into my actual measurement, and then I'm going to connect this to my bum rise diagonally. So now I'll cut out what I have here. So you can see that it is really simple to cut this trouser, like I said. So I'm cutting out my bum rise, and this is what I have. So now again I'm going to slash this side open so that I can have my back also in two separate pieces. So the next thing to cut now is my pockets. Okay, so this is the front and this is the back. I hope you get that. So now, like I said, the 2 inches, by the time you fold this now, you place this on this side, you can see that we've already added our crotch length now is extended, and then we've added all the necessary allowance that we want to add to this part of our trouser. So I just did it on this side so that it will be easier for us, especially for beginners, because of this crush curve. So now to cut my trouser, I'm going to bring in my new fabric. Okay, so for this pocket, the first thing, remember the pocket is just going to be on the front part. So now this is my two front bodies. Now to shape it, because I want a slant pocket, I'm going to measure on this waist area. I'm going to measure 2 inches. So 2 inches inward, and then on the length I'm going to measure 7 inches. So now using my ruler, you can make it slightly curved or just straight like I'm doing. I'm going to connect this together, and then I'm going to cut it out. Okay, so now I've shaped my front to accommodate the pocket. So now to cut the actual pocket, I'm going to take my leftover fabric, and then I'm going to fold it like this. So on fold, I'll be measuring. So I'm cutting the two pockets together. So this is the first one, this is the second one, and then I'm going to put it on fold. So the measurement that I'm working with, so now I'm putting this on fold, and then I'm working with a measurement of 7 inches on fold for the width. This is 7 inches, and then for the length is around 12.5 to 13 inches. So this depends on how big you want your pocket to be actually. Okay, so now the same way we have shaped our front front part to accommodate pockets, we have to shape the pocket also the same way. But first, you can leave the hem. This is going to be the hem of the pocket. You can leave it like this, or you can just give it a slightly curved effect. This is actually dependent on what you want. Okay, it doesn't have to be curved like this. And then now, to shape the trouser, I'm going to be putting it on fold, right side facing right side like this. Okay, and then I'll bring in one of my front part of the trouser. So I'm just going to place it, that part where we shaped, I'm going to place it on this side, on one side of the pocket, so just one side, and then I'm going to trim it out. So this is the part that I shaped. I'm placing it on it now, and then I'll trim it off. Okay, so now after trimming it off, this is what the pocket is going to look like. So now for the first one, it's going to have something like this. You can see our slants, and this is where the hand goes in. And then for the other one also, it's going to look like this. Okay, and then the other hand goes inwards like this. So now, to fix this to your trouser, the first thing we will do is to fix this to our trouser. So to fix it to our trouser now, I'm going to take the trouser part, the one that corresponds with this side. Okay, so I just want to explain how we are going to be sewing this now. So this is the pocket, this is the slant part of the pocket, this is the slant part on the trouser also. So you place it right side facing right side like this, because you don't want the wrong side to be showing outside. So after placing it right side facing right side, we're going to sew it. So I'm just going to hold it with my pin so that it will look like I have sewn it. Then after sewing it down like this, you top stitch on it, and then by the time you turn it out, this is what you're going to have. Okay, so now this is what the trouser is going to look like. You just take it together. This hemline is going to guide you. Take them together like this, and then you go over to the machine and sew it. So once you take it together, this is what you will have. Then your pocket will be here. So you have to be careful of this, because at this part you don't want this wrong part to be showing on the body of your trouser. So you should place it right side facing right side, so that you can have something like this. So now go over to the machine now and sew this. So the first one I'll be sewing now is on this side. I'm going to sew this. Okay, so like I said, now I've placed it on it and then held it with the pin. So I'm going to sew it. So after sewing the pockets now, like I said, you notch it and then you top stitch on it. So when you're top stitching on it, you can top stitch towards the pocket area. So by opening it up now, I'm pushing it to the pocket side, because I just like the seam line to be there. So this is actually not compulsory, so I'm just top stitching on it now, and I'm sewing it very close to the first seam. Okay, so when you top stitch on it, so I've top stitched on it now, and then the next thing I'm going to do now is to take this together. So this lower part is going to guide you. So I'm just going to take it together, and then I've seen what I have on my lower part. So you can actually stitch it externally like this, and then you weave it, or you stitch it internally, which is what I'll be doing. So to do this, I'm just going to fold it like this, arrange it well, and then I'm going to stitch it. Because I don't want the rough edges to be outside, that is why I'm stitching like this. So I'll just top stitch it where the pocket ends, and this is what I have. So now I'm going to bring out the rough side like this, and this is what my pocket is going to look like. So you can see that on the inner part now, the rough edges is not going to show. So the pocket is done now, as you can see. This is what our pocket is looking like, and this is where the hand goes inside. So now this part also, you can top stitch on it. If when you put your hand in your pocket and you dip it out, you don't want this seam allowance to also be showing. So what you can do to avoid that is just to top stitch on this part where the seam allowance is, so that it's going to be like a French seam, where your allowance is just going to be tucked in. It's not going to be showing both internally and externally. But all this is actually not compulsory if you have a serger. Okay, so now I've top stitched on it, so by the time you dip your hand and bring it out, you can see that it is also neat on the inside. So the last thing I'm going to do now is to arrange this well now, and then you brace it up on the upper part. Okay, so you arrange your trouser well, and then on this upper part here you sew it so that it can hold it down for you. So what we have done now, we'll do to the other part of the trouser also. Okay. So now the pocket is fixed, and then I'll go ahead now and fix the other pocket also. Okay, so now I'm back to our table, and this is what our pocket is looking like. It is fixed. So this is the first one, and this is the second one. So this is what it's looking like internally. You can see how clean it is looking on the inner side. So now the next thing you're going to do now is to sew the crotch for both front and back. So I'll take the front together now. I'll go ahead now and sew it on the crotch, and then also I'll do the same thing for the back. I'll take the back together also and sew it on the crotch, just like we join our normal trouser. Then after joining it on the crotch, I'll join the under area also. So the crotch is fixed now, and this is what it's looking like. So this is the front. Okay, so this is the back, and this is the front. So I'm going to be taking the front and back together, and then I'll fix the underarm by just matching the crotch together, and then sew it to the lower part like this. So they have to match, so you can see what we have here, and then do the same thing on the other side also before joining it on the side seam. Then we'll go over now and fix our band. Okay, so now I've joined it on the under area now, and then on the side. So on the side seam, I just sew it by half an inch. Remember, I just added 2-inch allowance, and I did not have any allowance on the front part. I just added my 2 inches on the back, and it's fine for me. It will still be free enough. So this is what it's looking like, and it's this big because, like I said, it's for a big size. So now this is the pocket of the front. Now turning everything out now, this is what we have. So I'm going to measure around the waist so that I can cut my band. Okay, so this is the pocket, this is the trouser, sorry, this is the trouser, and this is the pocket that we put on the front. So you can make it deeper than this. Remember, the length we used for our pocket is just around 12 inches. If you want it deeper, you just increase your length if that is what you want. So now I'll take my tape rule now and measure what I have on the waist, and I'm going to use that to cut my band. So now you can start measuring from the back part. So from that part now you measure round from the center back. I'm measuring what I have round. Then I'm back to the center back again, and then I have 47 inches, exactly 47 inches. So I'll add 1 inch seam allowance to that, and that's going to give me 48. So I'll cut a long fabric of 48 inches by 5 inches because I'm using a 2 inches band, and then I would need half inch to sew it. So 2 inches plus 2 inches is going to be 4 because it's going to be cut on fold. Then the half inch that I need to sew it is going to give me 1 inch. That's going to be a total of 5 inches. So I'll cut a long fabric of 48 inches by 5 inches. Okay, so now the band is cut out, and I just added this very soft interfacing. So I don't have a strong gum stitch. That was why I added it for. If you have something strong, you can just add on one side of the band. So now the band is 5 inches long, and I ironed in half an inch allowance on just one side. Then I also folded it into two to iron. So this is the other allowance here, not ironed, and the length is 48 inches. So the first thing I'm going to do now is to sew it together like this so that it can be one piece. So here now I'm going to take this together now, and then I'll close it. But for you to do this, you will have to be sure. You have to be sure that what you took here is exactly your band measurement. Okay, so I'm going to close this now, and then after closing it, I'll pin it round my band starting from this. So this sewn part, that's the closed part, because we don't want any seam at our center front. The closed part is what I'm going to be pinning to the center back like this. So I'll pin it round, and then I'll sew it before I bring it for us to continue. Okay, so the center back is joined together now, as you can see, and then I placed that joint part against my center back seam line so that it can be continuous, and then I just pinned everything around to fit my exact band measurement, as you can see, and then I went ahead to sew it all around. So now this is sewn. The next thing now is to fix elastic on the back part alone. Okay, so this is the elastic that I'll be fixing to it, and then the front part will not have any elastic. So the fixing will start from where the front joint to the back. That's where the side seam is after the pocket. So on the side seam here, I'm just going to open up my band, insert my elastic here, and then I'll hold it. You can leave few allowance. Then I'm going to fold it back, fold in my seam allowance here, cover up completely with my band, and then I'll use a stitch to hold it down. So after holding it down with a stitch, I will start sewing it. Okay, so let's just go to the machine so that we can see this well. Okay, so now I'll open up the side seam, any side you want. This is where the side joins together. You can see the seam line here. So now I'm going to place my elastic at that point. I'm leaving a few inches as allowance. Then this same allowance that you use to sew your band, you push it inwards, and then you fix your band on the upper part here, because you don't want to sew on your band. So you push it to the upper part of your, that's where your fold of your band occurs. So you push it there, then you fold this band on top of it. Then after that, I'll go ahead now and sew it down so that I can hold that point with a stitch. Okay, so now you can see that I've held it with a stitch. I'm trying to use a color of thread that we're going to see, because this fabric is actually multicolored. So now it is held together. Now you can see the allowance, and this is the band. So now the next thing now is for me to sew the band completely. So now I'll sew the back first. Then after sewing the back, I'm going to push the elastic to the size that I want. That's why I said you should make sure that you're not sewing on your elastic by pushing it to this upper part, because we're not sewing on this upper part, we're sewing on the lower part. So you can actually paint this if you want, or you can sew it as you go. So just push your band in upwards, fold in this allowance, and then cover up with your band. And because we have already ironed this down, it makes it easy for us to sew. So now you cover this. Like I said, if you want to pin it, you can pin it down to make it easy for you. Then you do this all through the back. Remember, we're adding elastic to just the back part. So now you pin it all the way to the side seam of the back. Okay, and if you already measured your elastic, all you just need to do, so that's another method. You can, instead of pushing your elastic, you can just measure your waist, your actual waist measurement. So your actual waist measurement, now you can divide it by maybe 2 or 3, or however you want this to be fitted, and depending on how stretchy this elastic is. So now you can divide your waist measurements by 4, and then use that to cut out your elastic. So the actual waist measurements I'm working with for this person is actually 36 inches. Divided by 4 is going to give me 9 inches. So I can just cut out 9 inches and then see if it stretches well. which I think it does. If it's small, you can add to it. So if it can just stretch, so the what I'm using as a guide is if what I have measured can stretch completely to all my back part. So I've stretched it out and I have around 14 inches covering the whole space. So now I've cut my elastic shorter to the 14 inches. So now the next thing I'm going to do now is to look for the other side seam. Okay, remember it's just going to be on the back. So this is the first seam, first part here joint. So now I look for the other side seam, and this is it here. Then I'm going to place it there also, just the same way. Push it to the forward, cover to the upper part, cover it up, fold in your seam allowance, cover it up, and then hold that part with a stitch also. So this way you can easily sew all the band together at once, because our elastic have already been fixed to just the back part. I hope we understand that. So I think this is simpler, or you can just sew your elastic and drag it, whichever one is fine for you. You can work with it. So now the elastic have been fixed to this side. You can see the pocket. This is the first side seam, and here is the second side seam. You can see the other pocket. So now the next thing now is to cover up the band, and then you sew it. So as you are sewing, you just stretch out the elastic. So now you cover up your band and then you sew around it. Okay, so you place the elastic here, pushing you place your trouser, pushing the elastic, and then you keep sewing around. So it's that simple. So if you are doing this, you should use a matching color of thread, but this fabric is multicolor, so I want us to see what I am doing. That's why I'm using this color of thread. So as you are sewing, you just push. You can see, because we are not sewing on the elastic, it is easy for us to push it so that we can have something smooth on this side to sew on also. So you just push it, and then you have this side also straight, and you'll be able to sew on it. So once you sew, you can push your elastic however you want, because we are yet to sew on it. So it is that simple. So you cover your elastic and you keep sewing it round till you get to the front part. So the band is completely fixed now, and this is what the three-quarter is looking like. Okay, so you can see that the first does not have elastic in it and it's still flat, and then the elastic is just on the back part. So now on the back part, you can just run a stitch at the center part like this by dragging and then sewing it. I have a tutorial on how to fix an elastic on a dress, so you can see what I'm talking about in that tutorial. This is the back part, and these are the two pockets that we fixed. Okay, so this is the pockets all fixed. You just need to hem it on the lower part here and you are good to go. So now take this to the mannequin so that we'll see what it looks like. Okay, so this is what our trouser is looking like on the mannequin. You can see the length of the trouser is 3/4, so you can make it as long as you want, and then the front part is still flat while the elastic is just on the back part, and this is the trouser. And like I said, you know, this is for a big size, so I just had to hold it with pins at the back for it to stay. So I'll turn the back for us to see now. I can see how flat the crotch area is. It's not looking bumpy, and we used freehand for this, so it's very, very simple to make. So this is the elastic part at the back. It's not so fitted because this is not for this mannequin size, but you can see the elastic, so it's easy to wear because there's no zipper in this, but the elastic that we put at the back makes it easy for the person wearing this to wear it. I hope you enjoyed making this tutorial with me. If you enjoyed this, let us know in the comment section, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.